Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dr. Hollowed. Join us as deep-sea divers unravel the haunting experiences they've encountered beneath the waves. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. I went on a dive in Cozumel, which we booked through a cruise. It was my first real dive after getting certified. The first dive of the day was a drift dive where you all go down and over the wall. The depth drops from 50 to over 200, I think. You're supposed to go down to 80 and just drift along in the current, with the group. At one point, after I'd been looking at stuff along the wall, I looked around and was totally alone. Nobody is nearby. I checked my depth and was at 92. I looked up, and the group was there about 12 above me. I quickly inflated my BCD and rejoined the group. Nothing bad happened, but I thought I was all alone there for a few seconds. I've since done that dive 3 more times, and I love it. So I once went to Belize to do some diving with my girlfriend, who just got certified. We had done a few dives that day, including the Blue Hole, which was about 135 feet. On one of the dives, we had to do a decompression stop, and my girlfriend started having mask issues where water was getting in. So she started panicking. I could see that she was starting to panic, but she was also moving away from the group by slowly ascending. I kept motioning to her that she had to come back down, and she kept pointing to her mask. I started freaking out a bit myself because she wouldn't listen and we could not surface. She had a little air in her BCD, which was also making her slowly go up. Eventually, I had to grab her, drain her BCD, and pull her down. It was very scary to think we could have gotten the bends. I still think about it to this day. Not me, but a family friend is a coral diver, and a few years ago he went missing at sea. He was diving solo, a big mistake, and failed to surface. The other crew dived down to see his equipment just sitting on the ocean floor with no sign of him, thinking he'd been taken by a shark. They then returned to the surface and tried looking for him there in case he was floating. The crew couldn't see him because of the late afternoon sun reflecting on the water, and they left without him. He had to drift or swim for about 12 hours to get to an island, getting all blistered and sunburnt to a crisp. When he washed up on the island in the middle of the night, the villagers thought he was a white ghost, so they were really scared of him. When they finally helped him, it turned out that no one on the island had phone credit, so it was a mission to even try and contact the mainland. He ended up home safe and sound, so there was a happy ending eventually. We found out that the reason he abandoned his equipment was because he found a rare clownfish and was trying to catch it. The equipment was quite heavy and would have restricted movement. He did catch it, and he held onto it for his whole ordeal. When he got back, it lived in a fish tank in his office for a while. I dove off of a houseboat dock in a man-made lake around June and went looking for a gun in 50 feet of water under the dock. We had dropped the anchor line down where it had been dropped, so I pulled myself down on the rope. I was using a snubba and had 60 feet of hose. It was very dark down at the bottom. I've been deeper than 50 feet, to the Vandenberg in the Keys, but this was really creepy. It was very dark. I had a flashlight from the 80s that didn't help me at all. There were a ton of fallen trees that had slid down from the shore, and their branches were super creepy. I ended up just sticking my hands in the silt randomly, and I found the gun. It had fallen 6 months before. I don't want to go back down there, though. I often dive off the NC coast, and we have a wreck called the Aeolus. Its main attraction is a section of the wreck, which some refer to as the Shark Lounge. Some of the walls of the ship are gone, but there are still some support beams that hold up the ceiling. Basically, sharks can freely swim under this canopy and catch some Z's. So anytime you dive there, you'll pretty much always get to see some sand tigers. The last time I was on the wreck, before entering the lounge, I was floating off the side of the wreck, taking it all in, and waiting for my buddy. Unbeknownst to me, a thresher shark was swimming below me. They are quite fascinating sharks. They use their long tails to whip schools of fish in order to kill or stun them. Well, this thresher didn't know I was there either because his dorsal fin and my fin brushed against one another. I don't know who was more scared, me or the shark. But he whipped his tail against the side of the wreck, which made a loud crack sound, and sped off in the other direction. Looking back, it's not so scary to me now, but when it happened, my heart stopped. I was doing my qualifying deep dive for an advanced diver. We were diving off the southern coast of Mozambique. Really choppy launch through waves, and we were holding on for dear life through the launch. I nicked my finger during this. I didn't think much of it. I started our dive, got down to 45 meters, and then realized the pressure was making the blood flow heavily from my finger at that depth. I would have stressed more about it, but then I narked at 45 meters. Luckily, my dive master noticed and gently led me up about 2 meters, so I could not be drunk at 45 meters. So I kind of forgot about the blood flowing out of my finger and making clouds around me. We were doing a multi-stage ascent to safely get back up. At about 25 meters, a school of 4 hammerhead sharks started circling us, followed us up to 15 meters, then swam away. I was diving with a mom, her husband, and their son on a night dive. I don't know how many dives they've been on, but the mom, for some reason, decided to just go up without signaling anyone why. She did a thumbs up signal, which means she needs to go up, and when the dive instructor signaled back, asking why she just went up, so the guide is trying to get her to come down when a boat comes across and runs her right over. I forget the exact size of the boat, but it was a big dual motor. Blood was everywhere, and we had to rush out because there were a lot of sharks in the area. She died instantly, I assume. I didn't see much once we surfaced, as I was busy vomiting from everything. I do underwater construction for a living, and my scariest moment was when I was trying to rig up a concrete slab that was a couple thousand pounds to get picked out of the water by a crane. It started to tip over while I was working on it, and I had to jump out of the way quickly to avoid it falling on me. When it fell, it landed right on my dive hose, which supplies me with air from the surface. Luckily, the force of it hitting the ground broke the slab, and I was able to shimmy my dive hose between the pieces with a lot of effort. This all happened about 70 feet from the surface. About 9 months ago, I was swimming through a little coral canyon off of Okinawa with my brother-in-law, about 65 feet underwater. The next thing I knew, we were on the surface, with him dragging me towards the shore. We're still not sure what triggered it, probably a panic attack, but I honestly felt fine the whole dive up to this point and have done it 20 plus times with no other incidents, but I had blacked out and overinflated my BCD and rocketed to the surface in about 6 seconds. I had a reverse sinus squeeze, popped eardrums, and type 2 DCS. I spent 5 hours in the deco chamber. Thank God I have a US Marine rescue diver for a brother-in-law. In the summer, I teach at a dive school in the Dutch Caribbean. On the island I work on, there are special zones where boats are never allowed in, even though they are in the open sea, just because there are so many divers in the water. Me and another instructor were teaching a family of 5 to dive, so this was the first course. We did our first 2 lessons in the pool to get the basics down and just get familiar with all the gear, and the family was all good, really easygoing, and quickly picked up on stuff. So for our first open water dive, we go to one of the spots where boats are not allowed. It's not too deep, has a good view, and has a nice corral structure as well. We do some exercises on the seafloor, about 10 meters, 30 feet deep, in a sandy bit with nothing close by that the students could destroy by accident. This is just to get everyone familiar with the salt and the elements. Some struggles, but all good in the end. We all have enough air left and decide to go on a little dive deeper into the corral. I saw a kid, about 14, having a bit of trouble and getting uneasy, also showing some signs that they were going to panic, so I stayed extra close to them. My fellow instructor was up front leading the group, and I was in the back with the kid, and all the other students buddy-upped. We do hear some boats and stuff, but you hear that often, they are not in the area, just driving by, until this one rental boat comes in the area, and right at this time the kid starts to get more panicked, so I try to calm them down, which doesn't work, and the kid tries to go up quite fast, still at about 10 meters, not good, but not dramatic, so I grab on and do the procedure to try and stop them. Enter the rental boat, zooming right towards us. A fellow instructor is trying to get their attention by pulsing his secondary air to no avail. At this time, the kid is panicking even more, and at some point I do have to let go because of my own safety. Please understand that I have been trying to calm them down for about a minute at this point, so the kid bolts up, and the boat did hit them, just barely missing the propeller. I really was just waiting to see the blood, but luckily noting. I also bolted up, was at about 5 meters, 15 feet, and checked up on the kid, somehow totally unharmed, not a visual scratch. So I turn around to the boat, which luckily did stop, and all the adrenaline just lets go, and I swear this guy into oblivion. Professional? No. Was it a release for me at the moment? Yes. We of course end our dive right away and go back to the shore. I offered to taxi the kid to the shore so they don't have to swim, but they wanted to swim and said they were fine. Although this is a good sign, I, of course, stay right on them. We get to the shore, explain what happened, and the kid goes to the hospital. Minor memory loss, but nothing else. So the kid takes a couple days off and then finishes the course like a champ. What about the rental boat idiots? We have the Dutch military police dive at our shop, not just like officers but also the detectives and stuff, so we tell them and go to the rental place right away, only 1 or 2 on the island. finds the captain of the boat and gives them a couple of strong words of advice, but also the shop owner gets some strong words. Parents didn't want to press charges, so he stays at that. I am from South Korea, and that country has lots of rivers. Usually a super nice place in the summers. Chill, fish, and swim. We, being stereotypical Koreans, decided to see who could dive deeper. Mind you, the river is basically a mini canyon with water, meaning that there are small caves and whatnot with current. Sometimes a current or invisible vortex drags you inside the underwater cave, and that's exactly what happened to me. I got trapped inside a vortex while getting sucked under this giant boulder. I tried to swim out of it, but I was just merely canceling out the dragging force, and the scary thing is that you feel like you are getting dragged down, the water feels cold, and it gets darker. Fortunately, one of my friends outside the water got to me before it was too late. I've never held on to something that tightly in my life. Apparently, if you swim off the center of the vortex and stick to the rock surface, it's a lot easier to get out. If you find yourself in this position, try to swim sideways and climb out instead of James Bond swimming up. I wasn't deep in the sea and wasn't diving, snorkeler for life, man, but I was in the Reef off the coast of Belize. Super calm area, known for its shallow, impossibly clear, bathtub temperature waters. You know in Finding Nemo, the drop-off? It's real. It's hard to see until you're right at it, but the current changes, and suddenly you're getting thrown around by currents and waves. I get body slammed into a coral, they're sharp motherfuckers. I had a spear with me because it was lobster season, and I basically stuck it in the sand and climbed up it like a flagpole just to get a couple feet above the coral so I could kick like hell and get back to the calm part so I could surface without getting sucked out. The scariest part is realizing the kayak tied to the marker buoy is suddenly a good 100 yards away, and you don't even realize you've drifted that far in only a couple minutes. Anyway, I have a neat scar from the coral all over my hip and thigh that I always have to tell people is not road rash. A living undersea rock shivved me when I was too stupid to wear a wetsuit. It seems silly. The water is 25 degrees. I'm working a commercial dive charter and have a few recreational divers I'm keeping track of while we're under. About 10 minutes into our dive, entirely too early, one young woman has completely sucked her air tank dry and is scrambling towards me at full speed, making the international hand signal for I'm out of air. Let me tell you, it's not what they teach you, potty, it's more similar to the kid from Robin Hood, Men in Tights, who's supposed to be a ripoff of the Gone Along kid. It's panic. I see this coming and instinctively tuck my chin and cover my regulator with my non-dominant hand. When people are out of breath, you can show them anything you want that will help them. The only thing they want is the reg in your mouth, because they can see it works. She grabs the regulator out of my hand and starts sucking air. To my horror, I watch the whole regulator fall to pieces and float away. I'm now looking straight down her throat. Before you get angry at me, it was not my fault, and it worked during the surface check. I realize something has gone horrifically wrong. Take a deep breath and pass my reg out of my mouth to her. Too late. She's blowing for the surface at 100 miles per hour from 100 feet under. Not good. I take my time getting to her, blow my safety stop, and say, hey, it's an emergency. Surface conditions are 8 to 10, and she's weighted down and not doing well. I assume the rescue position behind her, jam my working reg in her mouth, and start manually inflating her BCD, then I take her weights, my BCD can float 4 times what I dive with, big ass wing, and we signal the boat for help. Back on the boat, we go. Me, you good? You okay, you need CPR? I'm okay, thank you so much. Me, awesome. I'm going to go back to throwing up now, which I do on every boat trip, no matter what. Her, licking her lips and smacking her tongue, said, ooh, that's what that was. See, I throw up on every boat ride, as I mentioned, and it doesn't ever get better. Even if I black out, I still get sicker in my sleep, so I wind up puking underwater, which passes right through the reg, and I only eat peanut butter and root beer before a boat trip because it comes out of the reg very easily. That's my horror story. Stay safe out there. So I was around 17 on my first diving safari in Egypt. My whole family dives, and our buddy system is usually me with my mom and my dad with my brother. On this particular dive, though, my mom and brother weren't feeling well, so my dad and I went ahead and dived together. All is good so far. The instructor takes us on a stroll around the reef, but since we were with a fairly new group of divers, he decided to surface early so as not to risk anyone running out of air. My dad and I check our manometers and decide that we have way too much air in our tanks to waste it, so my dad signals to the instructor that we're staying for a bit longer. The instructor gives us the go-ahead, Since my dad has over 600 dives and all the qualifications of an instructor, and we scurry off as we watch the rest of the group ascend. So we're just casually chilling, taking pictures, etc., when I spot a creature that I can only describe as a mini tortilla with a similarly colored shark fin. It was the cutest thing I've seen so far, so I dashed towards it and started taking pictures while my dad followed. The little creature is swimming from one place to another, obviously because it's probably thinking why this massive predator with one eye is chasing me, but then it finally settles down and I lay on the sand in front of it. As I'm taking really close-up pictures, something in my brain clicks, and I go, a cute, unfamiliar creature. I'm going to pet it. As my hand is literally 30 centimeters away from the animal, my dad gently pulls me away and signals that we need to surface because we're a bit low on air. We were 30 meters underwater, so we located where the boat was and started ascending, and at every safety stop, my dad was scolding me not to touch any animals. Me, being naive and clueless, ignores him and goes about my merry day. So we finally surface, and I go to show our instructor what we saw. As I'm showing him the pictures, he laughs and says, "Yeah, super cute, just don't ever touch it." I naively ask, "Why?" And he casually goes, "Oh, because that's an electric ray, and its electric discharge goes up to 220 volts, and at that depth it could potentially kill you." My OSHT moment was accompanied by my dad yelling in the background, "You're going to give your mother and me a heart attack. Stop touching everything you see." Story number 1. I used to live in South Florida, and I had a favorite dive spot called Blue Heron Bridge. The actual Blue Heron Bridge is a huge bridge that crosses the Intracoastal, ends on a small island, which is the actual dive area, and there's a little short bridge that leads to Singer Island. It's an absolutely incredible spot, and I've seen some amazing sea life. It felt like every single time I went to that spot, I would see something I'd never seen before in my life, and it was so cool. So this little bridge that connected to Singer Island was maybe 20 to 30 feet, and I don't know what it was. It could be the brightest, shiniest, clearest summer day, and it would still be black as night under that bridge. The only light at all is on the other side. It gets deep near the bridge, and you're likely to see some larger fish down in the trench, so I'm down there checking some stuff out when I look up under the bridge. All I see are 3 massive shapes, way the hell bigger than me, and they're headed in my direction very slowly. It was too dark to make out fins or a general shape, beyond big. My first immediate thought was, oh fuck, bull sharks. The Intracoastal is generally pretty safe, but you do get the odd bull shark here and there, and bulls are mean. They're not the gentle, misunderstood giants that the great whites are. Oh no. They'll bite you because fuck you, that's why. You know how squid will dart away from predators and leave a cloud of ink to distract and confuse them? I was about 2 seconds away from doing the same, only a cloud of something else. I was fucking terrified. Thankfully, what emerged into the bright sun was not a trio of sharks. It wound up being a family of manatees, a bull, cow, and calf. The bull was fucking huge. Easily 9 feet. The cow was probably 7 feet long, and the little calf was maybe 3 feet. Absolutely beautiful creatures. They glide silently by me, only a few feet away, each cocking their big heads to check me out, decide they're unimpressed, and swim away. I was absolutely awestruck. I'd seen manatees before, but never one as enormous as this bull, and never a whole family. Once they were gone, I turned back to the nearby rocks and was checking out some little fish and crabs and stuff, watching them go about their little lives, when I got that feeling on the back of my neck, like something or someone's coming up behind me. I turn around, and here comes the bull manatee, right at me. He's not going too fast, and I've never heard of manatees being aggressive, so I wasn't scared, but I did have a moment of what the fuck is he doing? He swam up super close to me, looked me up and down, then turned away close enough that I could reach out and pet him. Yes, that's legal as long as they come up to you. I guess he was just curious. I don't know, but it was the coolest thing ever. Story number 2 is much shorter than this one. I was diving off Key West for the first time, and we'd seen some really cool stuff off the boat on the way to the dive site. Dolphins riding the waves alongside us, a couple sharks, etc. The dive master did warn us that where we were diving was near the territory of a massive hammerhead, but he made sure to let us know hammerheads are bottom feeders, not man-eaters. So I had a glorious time with this dive and saw some incredible stuff. Probably the most amazing part was when I swam down by this huge rock to check out this gorgeous angelfish, and suddenly the rock lifted up off the ground and swam away. The rock had been a loggerhead sea turtle the size of a small car. Okay, an exaggeration. He was like 4 feet, but when you're that close, they look enormous, and we'd startled it. The cool thing was that my friend's 8-year-old daughter swam after the turtle, and the turtle was totally okay with it. It didn't like the adults, but is this small child swimming by it? It actually stopped, and she let him check him out. That was amazing. So the terrifying part was something I had never swam with. I kept getting nervous because, while the water was very clear, there was a visibility limit, and there was something out there that got murky. Something huge, at least 7 to 8 feet. And there were a few of them. Whatever they were, they knew we were there, and they were curious but keeping their distance. Suddenly, in my peripheral vision, one of them comes at me. Jesus H. tap dancing Christ, I didn't think it was physically possible for something that massive to move so fucking fast. It was so fast, it made it from the murky edge, probably 40 feet away, to within 1 foot of me and back to the murk, and I didn't even get to see what it was. All I could see was a huge, impossibly fast blur of black and silver. 3 times, this happened. They always came at me from behind or the side and were gone before I could see what they were. It was scaring the shit out of me. The only way I figured out what the hell they were was when I turned and watched them do it to another diver, and I could actually see them. Motherfucking tarpon. I'd seen them from the docks, I'd seen fishermen catch them, but I'd never actually been down in the water with them. They're harmless game fish. But my god, these things are fast. Like full on, leaving Barry Allen in the dust, fast. Really cool fish, but holy SHT were they scary. I'm a dive master and have been diving for 23 years now. Pretty much nothing really freaks me out at this point, but I've had a few creepy experiences. The worst was actually while freediving near the local harbor. I was just chilling on the surface in fairly low visibility water when I felt something bump into my arm. I looked to my side, and it's a clear bag bulging with awful, animal guts. Of all the things you'd want bumping into you, this is pretty low on the list. I assume it was thrown off a ship. If that bag had popped, it would probably have caused an actual sharknado. We also regularly do night dives here. This is South Africa, so it's not sissy tropical diving. Usually we have low visibility and strong currents, and most of our dives are fairly deep, about 100 feet. You see some incredibly rare stuff here at night. I was actually on Discovery Shark Week, which just aired with footage of 2 new species that I filmed here at night. But to get to the creepy story. Another dive master and I ended up being the only divers one night after several cancellations. So we dropped down to the reef, and we were immediately attacked by a shoal of amberjacks. Amberjacks are now large, strong, and fast fish. They were attracted and confused by our lights and proceeded to crash into us like fishy cruise missiles from the darkness. My buddy got hit in the head, and I got hit in the chest. I had one literally wiggle under my armpit at one point. As if that wasn't weird enough, on our decompression stop, we had humpback whales extremely close to us. Not in the limited range of our lights, but they were singing so loudly that I could feel my entire chest vibrating. You could just feel they were right there looking at us. Just a creepy dive, especially with only 2 people out in the inky blackness, 3 miles from shore. In fairness, it wasn't a deep dive, but this one scared the shit out of me for a second. My dive buddy and I were setting up at this old flooded quarry that's become a popular dive spot. The company that owns it has set up a bunch of floating platforms, which are suspended underwater by ropes tying them to buoys on the surface. Each of those buoys is rated to hold over 100 pounds, remember that. So we've geared up, walked into the water, and done our final checks when something a little further out in the distance grabs both of our attention. It's hard to explain what it was, maybe a slight sound, maybe a ripple in the water, but it felt wrong enough that suddenly we were both looking the same way at one of the pairs of buoys just offshore. And almost as soon as we set our eyes on them, one of the buoys snapped below the surface. What the fuck? My dive buddy said it, but I was thinking it would. The buoys were pretty hefty pieces of equipment, and one had just gotten pulled under the water like a bath toy. In a quarry where the biggest fish were a handful of trout, something was off. Of course, the WTF factor ratcheted up a couple of notches when the buoy returned. Forcefully. The damn thing shot out of the water, easily 6 feet in the air, before landing with a hard slap that reverberated out over the otherwise calm water of the quarry. My dive buddy and I made eye contact, and pretty much instantly we knew our dive plan had changed. We were checking that SHT out. Swimming down into the cold quarry water, I couldn't help but notice this was exactly the kind of thing that got people killed in horror movies. Here we were, alone in the murky water, our visibility topping out at maybe 10 feet. As we moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that anything could be right in front of us, just waiting to break through the gloom. Even while my rational brain reminded me that there couldn't possibly be anything down there, my older reptile brain kept on replaying the sight of the buoy sharply dipping below the surface. Yes, for those of you wondering, you can still sweat nervously underwater. As soon as we got to the platform, now sticking halfway out of the muddy quarry floor, The non-horror movie truth was pretty quickly evident. One of the two ropes attaching the buoys to the platform had snapped, and the remaining buoy alone wasn't strong enough to hold the weight. It had been pulled under but was still fighting hard to return to the surface. At some point during the platform's descent, buoyancy won a fight against gravity, and the trapped buoy broke free from its tie as well, sending it rocketing back above the surface. At the end of the day, it was totally logical. I still blame Cthulhu, though. I'm a longtime scuba diver, instructor/dive master, and an ex-commercial diver. I probably have a few horror stories that would make people's hair curl, diving literally in shit, for example, or helping drag a car with a body inside out of the river. But actually the most interesting story happened when I was on holiday in Turkey and diving over there as a tourist. I had a package booked with this little Turkish dive operator who ran out of a boat moored up just off an island. The dive masters seemed to be a good bunch, and as with all places, they took us in for a check dive, which, as an instructor, was a formality. So cue day 2, this little island is maybe 100 meters long, and you could swim around quite easily. It provides shelter in the lee of the island, where the large dive boat is moored. To get to the dive boat, a small tender picks you up from the beach, and we drive across a lagoon. So far, so good. We get kitted up on the main boat, and then the little tender takes us to a dive site with everything on except fins, a mask, and so forth. So we're motoring along, but there's 6 of us sitting in this little tender plus the skipper. We get out of the safety of the island's shelter, and the sea starts getting choppy. We motor on, but progressively, something seems to be happening with the boat. Waves are swamping the front, and the water's not coming out, the bilge isn't working. The boat progressively starts to get a little lower in the water, we're maybe 500 yards from the main boat now. I instinctively grab my fins, I know what is about to happen, and shout at my buddy, "Grab your stuff," which he does. And then the rest followed suit. The engine starts to splutter. I grab my mask and put it on, this boat is sinking fast. 10 seconds later, the skipper jumps off the boat as it finally just succumbs to the waves and disappears under the water, leaving the divers floating with inflated BCDs and the boat slowly sinking to the bottom 10 meters underneath us. My commercial diver kicks in. I say to the skipper, "Swim back to the boat and ask the captain to send the other tender and some BCDs on it." I knew he didn't have any lift bags. "We'll go down and dive into it, and I'll attach an SMB to it so we know where it is. Come back and meet me." He nodded and swam off, and the other dive master went off and dived with the group while I, as a customer here, mined, and my buddy dived the wreck of the tender we had just been on. I dropped down to the tender, which was leaking fuel, and thankfully sat upright in the seagrass at around 10 meters. I sent up my SMB, safety sausage, and tied it to one of the boards on the deck of the tender. Once we saw the other tender reappear a few minutes later, I slowly ascended with my buddy. We grabbed the BCDs off the chap, and thankfully I had my dry suit hose attached to my regulator. It was my gear, so we took 4 BCDs down and strategically clipped them off to different parts of the boat. I then, thankfully with the same connector, used my dry suit hose to inflate them one at a time, and slowly the boat lifted off the grass and made its way to the surface. We tied a rope to the bow, and the other tender towed it back around to the main boat. Thankfully, I had enough gas left, so my buddy and I finished the dive by swimming back to the main dive boat underwater. Suffice to say, I had a few more dives with them, including an amazing night dive experience where the whole sea was fluorescent, and I didn't pay for a thing on that trip. They offered me a job, but I declined. Not really deep sea, but deep enough for recreational diving limits, 30 meters without additional training. A buddy of mine is a very experienced diving instructor and avid traveler. He's taught several friends to dive and then went on extended diving vacations together. This time it was my turn. First, a background. During our training, he's emphasized battle-tested skills and practice, because diving can be dangerous. He's seen all kinds of shit, and he wants his friends to be safe divers. Takes all precautions and often makes training harder than it needs to be just so you get used to diving under stress. During the lessons, he's told us many crazy stories to scare us. One of them was in a situation 80 feet down on a night dive in Asia somewhere where a box jellyfish that was 10 feet tall was inches away from grabbing one of their group. The risk here is that they can sting you badly and get you tangled up, but the sting shock usually causes you to clench your jaw, scream and spit out your regulator, etc., and in bad cases, it can paralyze muscles for a period of time. Any of those things can cause you to drown. He very carefully did a come-hither motion to the diver to get him to swim forward without looking behind him. It worked, and they got the fuck out of there. I didn't tell the diver what happened until they got back on the boat. Panic is the enemy underwater. Fast forward to my trip with him. I'm recently certified, feeling pretty confident, and we're doing a bunch more dives and training to up my experience. We work up to a deep dive, a night dive, and a wreck dive, all in one. You need additional training to do all three specialties. I completed each, and this was my first dive combining them all. I'm super excited. We're diving a sunken oil freighter from World War II at night that's at 100 feet deep, close to Hawaii. Also, I'm a little nervous, as usually you only introduce 1 or 2 new variables with each new dive, but this night's dive charter only went once a month, and the weather was perfect, so we booked it. So I'm going to have to apply several tactics all at once that will take away from being able to fully enjoy the fun of the dive, but whatever, I'm excited just to get to go. We dive down, and the ship is badass. The experience at night only amplifies how cool and kind of creepy it all is. Fuck, the ocean is dark at night. You use flashlights and glow sticks zip tied to your gear to see. Visibility is challenging, but it's like a rave down there with about 20 of us divers. Your air goes quickly at that depth, maybe 20 to 30 minutes tops for a newer diver like myself, but I'm soaking it all in. My buddy and I are swimming by the ship's mast when I feel a tickle on the back of my neck. Instantly, I think back to that jellyfish story he told me, and I react with a reptilian brain. I pull out my dive knife, and I start stabbing at the thing that's tickling my neck. I'm not fucking dying to a spineless jellyfish. Forget pointing my flashlight at what it is so I can see it, I just start stabbing the darkness. Clearly not thinking straight or calmly. I'm breathing a little harder, tossing around a bit, and causing a commotion of bubbles. Buddy is just staring right at me. After what feels like forever but probably only 20 seconds, I finally get the sense to kick a circle and shine my light on what's touching me. I'm getting prepared to have to go knife to tentacle with this fucking jellyfish, and I see a massive fucking American flag hanging off the ship's mast. It's clearly been there for a while, it looks weathered, but it's got 7 or 8 fresh new holes in the bottom corner. Fuck me. I'm an idiot. I turn to my buddy, shine my light on him, and he's killing himself laughing. He saw the whole thing, and he let me sort out my panic because he knew it would be a good lesson for me. I'm an idiot. We finish up the dive, get back on the boat, and have a good laugh on land. The next day, I tell the dive shop I've been diving with the story over a few beers and offer to buy them a new flag. They're killing themselves laughing at my expense and told me not to worry about the flag, the story was worth it. I bought a few rounds for us all to make up for it. I still feel mortified to this day, but it is funny to laugh at now. I did a night dive on the Great Barrier Reef with my partner, who was learning to dive, myself, about 10 years of diving, and a dive master. First night dive for my partner, who had been hearing from the two of us about how incredible it is. Night diving is one of those amazing, life-changing experiences, completely different from daytime diving as the sights and sounds of the reef are radically different, plus viewing the reef through just the small areas of light from your torches changes how you process the experience. It's exhilarating and incredibly zen at the same time. As we're circling back to the boat, the sharks, who have been standoffish but curious, as they usually are, come in, and one has an inquisitive bite of the dive master's fins. I had never seen or heard of sharks getting this aggressive with divers, so the three of us damn near catapulted ourselves out of the water and cut the dive short. I had never been worried about sharks while diving until that moment. Normally, they're more afraid of you than you are of them. But not this time.